In this video, we are looking at problems involving speed, distance, and time. Let's look at the first question. Sebastian covers 240 miles in 3 hours on a highway. Work out his average speed. Speed depends on two things: the distance covered and the time taken. In fact, we have a formula for speed. The average speed of a person or an object equals the distance travelled divided by the time taken. Now, what we need to do in this question is calculate Sebastian's average speed. So the average speed is going to be Sebastian's distance travelled, which is 240 miles, and the time taken for that was 3 hours. So we need to divide that by 3 hours. This gives us 240 divided by 3, which is 80. And the units we want are miles divided by hours, and we write that as miles per hour. If the question said that Sebastian had actually travelled 240 kilometres in 3 hours, then the answer would have been 240 kilometres divided by 3 hours, which would be 80 kilometres per hour. But it actually said miles, so let's stick to miles per hour. Here's question B. Jess cycles to work at an average speed of 16 miles per hour for 45 minutes. What distance does she cover? I'm going to start by writing the formula that we learnt before. Next, I'm going to substitute the values that we've got in the question into the formula. So we know her average speed and we know the time taken for her journey. Now, it's important to notice here that the unit of time, that's part of the compound unit for speed, is hours. We've got miles per hour. However, the time duration for which she's travelling is given in minutes. So to make this consistent, what I'm going to do is write 45 minutes in hours. 45 minutes is actually 3/4 of an hour. Now, the question is asking us what distance she covers. So I'm going to rearrange this formula to make the distance travelled the subject. And to do that, I need to multiply the left and the right hand side by the time taken. That gives me average speed multiplied by time taken equals the distance travelled. Now we can substitute the numbers in. The average speed was 16 miles per hour, and Jess travelled at that average speed for 3/4 of an hour. And the distance travelled is then going to be 16 multiplied by 3/4 miles. 16 multiplied by 3/4 is the same as finding 3/4 of 16. A quarter of 16 is 4. That means 3/4 of 16 is 12. So our answer is 12 miles. That should make sense. Let's just do a common sense check here. If you were travelling at 16 miles per hour for a whole hour, you would expect to travel 16 miles. Now, if you're only travelling for 3/4 of an hour, you would expect to travel 3/4 of 16 miles. And that's exactly what we've worked out here. Let's move on to the final question. Here's question C. A mapping app suggests that the average speed on a busy road is 20 miles per hour. How long will it take to cover 5 miles on this road? Again, I'm going to start with the formula. Average speed equals distance travelled over time taken. Now, in this question, we are looking for the time taken, how long it will take to cover a certain distance at a certain speed. So I'm going to rearrange this formula to make the time taken the subject. Multiplying both sides by the time taken and dividing by average speed, we get time taken equals distance travelled divided by average speed. Now, in the question, we've been given the average speed that we need to use. That's 20 miles per hour. And we've also been given the distance that needs to be travelled. That's 5 miles. Substituting those values in, we get the time taken equals 5 miles divided by 20 miles per hour. Now notice the consistency here. We've got a speed measured in miles per unit of time, and we've got a distance measured in miles as well. So we can simply divide these and we'll get our time taken measured in these units of time, which in this case is hours. So 5 divided by 20 is simply a quarter, and our units are just going to be hours. So it's going to take a quarter of an hour. We can now write that in minutes if we want to. A quarter of an hour is 15 minutes. Again, we can do a common sense check here. If the average speed is 20 miles per hour, then to go 5 miles, it's only going to take 5/20ths of an hour. 5 miles is a quarter of 20 miles. So if we're doing 20 miles in 1 hour, 5 miles will only take a quarter of an hour. That's 5/20ths. So our answer is a quarter of an hour, or alternatively 15 minutes.